My name is Arne Doornebal of the Netherlands African Business Council, and the moderator today, and also the country representative for Uganda. I've been moderating a number of these webinars. The Ugandan one to me personally is a special one because I worked and lived in Uganda for 7 years. To the people who are joining us from Uganda, even though it's Heroes Day, I would say to Sanise Ukulaba, big welcome to all of you. I said this webinar is part of a series of the 15 focus countries which were recently set out by the Dutch private sector. Uganda is one of the 15. It's actually number 15 on the list, but I do think it's number 1 on the list given the high turnout of participants today. Kindly note there is indeed room for questions at the end. You can we will collect the questions that come through the chat, and then we will address them in case they haven't been addressed yet. As the NABC country coordinator for Uganda, I would like to give a brief overview of the activities we have been doing. As said before, there's always been a great interest among Dutch companies for doing business in Uganda. Even as recent as November, one of the last trade missions we did before COVID broke out was to Uganda, where my colleague from the Agri team went to Uganda with a small group of European spices company, 5 of them in total. And they didn't only go to Kampala, but they went to West Nile, they went to Fort Portal area to actually see where the spices are grown. The year before, 2 years before, there was a large poultry trade mission going to that went to Uganda. Today we also have a speaker from the poultry sector, which is an important and growing sector in Uganda. And there were other trade missions even the year before in 2015. And of course we had incoming delegations, smaller ones and larger ones over the past years. And every year the best farmers from Uganda also coming to the Netherlands, although that's not organized by NABC. Other project that is coming up is the Hortimag project. It's going to be commencing this year, and NABC will play a small role in that. It's mainly aimed at improving the value chain in the horticulture sector in Uganda, and we are doing that in partnership with TechnoServe as well as the BIT network, which who is also joining us today. The other partners are PUM, the Uganda National Bureau of Standards, and Uganda's National Agricultural Research Organization. But more about that later. Having said that, although today is a webinar, we're calling it actually a hybrid webinar because we have already one of the participants who came driving all the way to our office to be with us today physically. Very much appreciated. And also our first speaker is here with us today. She's the ambassador of Uganda, based in Brussels, but responsible for the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg, as well as the EU institutions. And if that's not enough, also to all the international institutions which are based here in the Netherlands. Very warm welcome. Your Excellency Mirjam Blaak.
Thank you very much. Karibu, everybody. And well, here we are in cold Holland at the moment at the NABC headquarters. But it's great that you can all log in and listen to this webinar. I'm looking forward to this 1 hour. And at the same time, I would like to all wish you a happy Heroes Day today. And thank you for joining us, even though it's a public holiday in Uganda. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Of course, the whole world has been infected by COVID. The Netherlands reported more than 6,000 casualties. Uganda is still at 0 casualties. Now, I'm not saved myself, but it does look like a miracle.
Yes, I think indeed it is remarkable that we have no death recorded yet as a result of the COVID infections. And I think that is largely attributed to the fact that we started the lockdown quite early. In fact, we had this big seminar, Uganda EU, the business forum that was taking place. And already we had said that certain nationals of certain countries, the four European countries which were already heavily affected by the pandemic, were not allowed to participate. So that's the last big seminar that took place on the 9th and 10th of March. And after that, yes, very much more restrictive measures were taken. So the lockdown is still on. We have no air traffic except for some cargo and some special flights that may have been allowed as part of an evacuation, which of course brings us to the next issue that the tourism sector is very, very badly affected. But I think these measures that the government has taken has basically assisted us in not having the casualties. And even though I must admit that the numbers are getting higher every day, and that is largely due to the fact that truck drivers who are either in transit or delivering their goods from neighboring countries are infected. We have a long queue at the border with Malawi, because all drivers coming in do have to undergo a test.
Right. So the goods are delayed coming in the country.
These goods are delayed coming into the country, which cannot be helped. But we are a land-linked country, so with all our neighbors, we are also providing for a transit corridor, and that, basically it gives us additional problems of the risk of more infections, and that is sad. We were very much criticized, as I said, this first forum that we were holding, and said, "Oh, Uganda, you're crazy, you're doing, it's not fair," and people were
participants were sent away.
Sort of, but no, they were told before they were airborne, actually. But
they didn't believe it.
Later on, it appears that Uganda was quite apt and just in taking these measures early. I think which has indeed resulted in these relatively few numbers that we have.
Exactly, and of course, here in Europe now things are opening up. Borders are opening up in the next couple of weeks. Of course, also in Africa, we've already seen certain restrictions lifted. I believe the public transport can go again, although with half of the people inside. Has anything been said about reopening of the borders for tourism and the airport?
Well, the aviation sector and tourism sector, the leisure industry, bars, there is the concerts, everything that we love so much. Dancing and singing is part of our life in the weekends, and definitely that has been very affected. So you can also see that I believe recently aviation stakeholders have been requesting the government whether the airspace could actually be opening up towards the end of June. So our airlines flying into Uganda are preparing, but as you know, the situation is day by day changing. So we cannot say whether we are going to open it. It all depends on how we can manage, the truck drivers, and maybe situations like in South Sudan, where we are also at risk that maybe larger numbers who have been infected coming over, and in maybe the settlements that we already have there in the north for South Sudanese. So there are certain risks involved, and we have to see how the situation progresses. That's why His Excellency President Museveni has addressed the nation many, many times on the COVID measures, and indeed, every time there is a change, yes, he will mention it, but it is like a little bit looking into a crystal ball. We only hope that with regard to the tourism sector and passengers, I have even 3 of my staff who are presently in Uganda, who we also need back in our mission in Brussels. And we hope that also with time passing, that there are these rapid testing kits, as you know, that could give you a result quite rapidly. We first had testing kits that were 48 hours. Now it seems to be already been reduced to 20 minutes. So maybe we could we could take measures. That all needs to be seen, but we are hoping that that could be the case. That people coming in, even if they are tourists, that they are immediately tested, and then maybe go only in quarantine for maybe 3 days. Then they are being tested again, and that
can
may
proceed their journey.
Yes, not only for tourists, but also for people, of course, doing business. It's not easy, but we have to cope with the situation the way we are being presented with. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. And is there already something which you can say about? I remember the president mentioned the real economy, and then is there already something to be said about which sectors can sail through? I mean, a lot of Dutch companies, of course, are active in agribusiness and flowers and agriculture. What can be said about that? Where are there going to be the biggest opportunities once this is over?
Yeah. Well, first of all, yes, President mentioned in his the State of the Nation address last Thursday, the real and the vulnerable economy. There is indeed a distinction, and the vulnerable economy, which is the one that is hardly hit, is of course the tourism, leisure, and pleasure sectors, like I had mentioned before. And lodges have been closed, but we know that the parks have now been reopened, the national parks, except for the chimpanzees and the gorillas, because we don't know how they could even be infected. So we want to preserve them from any dangers and risks that may be occurring. What is also surprising to me is when the president read all the figures with regard to our exports. In fact, yes, they have reduced, but agriculture exports have still been taking place in the pandemic, during the pandemic. So we hope, of course, there have been reduced activities, but all in all, it was more than I had expected. So I think what we need to do is to ensure that we can continue to produce quality goods. Yeah, that is, I think, very important. We need to really improve on the quality so that we meet all the phytosanitary conditions in Europe to export. And I think opportunities for investors are always there with regard to adding value to our products. Instead of exporting our raw products, we should add value in the country nationally. And I think that is where the biggest opportunity still remains for many, many potential investors, especially Dutch people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I do see there's a question coming in, whether there's any updates about the locust situation. I don't know if you've I'm not sure if you were prepared for this, but otherwise you can perhaps look it up and get back to the question towards the end of the webinar.
Sorry that I don't have an update, but the way we have tackled the locust situation was quite effective, immediately spraying them on the ground when they are actually breeding, in the evening hours, and that we have used our army for in order to help us to protect the harvests and whatever was growing on the land. So, but there has been another problem arising, is the water levels in the Lake Victoria. So I think I've been reading more about the problems that we have there from people who are living around the lakes, who have been flooded, their houses have been destroyed. And so that is also of great concern to us. So it's not only COVID, but weather conditions, climate change is also combined with maybe hand-made, human errors in terms of the settlements in swamps and cutting off forests, which have contributed to these huge rainfalls, which have upped the water levels of the lake by almost 2 meters. Yeah,
it's incredible. Well, we hope there's going to be some solutions for that, and definitely water management is also again a specialty of the Dutch. So I'm very sure there's probably some companies now looking into, hey, how can we best distribute water? I mean, at least having too much of it, and then it would be a matter of.
And we have already, in that sense, we have already since October we were letting 1,000 cubic meters per second to be passing through the River Nile through our dams, and we have now up to 2,200 cubic meters of water. So at least that should also give us some relief. But as long as the rains are continuing, as you know, it is hard to predict how we will be able to combat this threat again. Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you. Well, maybe here briefly lastly, but I do remember Mr. Museveni hinting at the possibility of an election delay next January. Is anything? Do you think is going to happen, or they may as well take place and then?
Well, nothing officially has been said other than what you have just stated, what the president himself has already mentioned. I think it all depends on how we can get through this pandemic and how quickly or step by step we can ease the lockdown and we can let life continue to be back to normal. And therefore that is still a little bit unpredictable. As it depends on many other factors, also the neighboring factors of our neighbors. So we can't say that what is going to happen for the elections. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ambassador Blaak-Sow. In fact, we're actually joined by two ambassadors today, because we also have live from Kampala the Dutch ambassador there, Mr. Henk-Jan Bakker. Ambassador Bakker, if you can hear and see us, kindly proceed with your opening remarks of today's webinar.
I can hear you and I can see you. Good morning, everybody, from my home office at my house in Kampala, which has been to a large extent my working place for the last 2 or 3 months. Before I start my introduction, maybe a few additional words on the locusts and the water. The locust situation at the moment, there is no crisis in Uganda, and that has apparently much to do with the prevailing wind direction, which pushes the locusts from Kenya and Ethiopia more into a northern direction than into a western direction towards Uganda. So for what it's worth, that at the moment is the situation. That can change, of course, but for the moment, Uganda is in a way lucky that the locusts are not arriving in the Karamoja. And as for the water, the Lake Victoria is a bit like I compare it to a bathtub that's overflowing. And with all consequences that entails. 2 things. One is that I just read yesterday that the ferry at Merchant Falls Park is now out of service because of the high level of the water in the River Nile. And the other one is that, and that's a pity because the parks and the lodges have just reopened. So for domestic tourism, it is very, very slowly coming back. That's of course a very small proportion of the tourism sector in Uganda, but at least it's something. And the other thing is that I know of at least one Dutch lodge owner who has become more Dutch than the Dutch, and he decided to build his own dike around his lodge at the shore of Lake Victoria to keep the water out. And in retrospect, he was absolutely right in doing that, because the water so far is only going up and it's not going down. So I think building dikes, one of the strengths of us Dutch, could be in high demand in the time to come. My opening remarks, I'll try to be very brief, because I find it always more interesting to go into a Q&A session. But as you all know, and for those who don't know and are new to Uganda, that Uganda is a relatively open country from a business perspective. Obviously, more work needs to be done or can be done to make doing business easier in Uganda. The country is ranked 116th on the World Bank Doing Business Index, below Kenya, below Rwanda, but better than many other sub-Saharan African countries like Tanzania, Ethiopia, or Ghana. And to boost the business climate, the government, together with the World Bank, the EU, and other bilateral development partners, including the Netherlands, we have undertaken several initiatives to improve the legislation, to improve the tax regime, and to make government bodies more efficient and effective towards foreign companies. One example is the one-stop shop that is now in Kampala since a few years. When you register a business, there's one place that you go to do so, and that makes it a lot easier than before. Mirjam talked about climate change. The climate is still very accommodating for Ugandan agriculture. There is sufficient rainfall. In the second half of last year, there was maybe too much rainfall. But there is still a lot of potential. The country is very slowly moving from subsistence farming to more professional and commercial agriculture. And as a Dutch embassy, that is one of the key areas where we try to help Uganda and intervene. And many Dutch companies are involved in that. There are interesting high added value crops. Vanilla is an example. Husbandry, pigs, chicken, cows, or export crops like tea, cocoa, coffee, sugar, as well as inputs like seeds, fertilizer, irrigation equipment, etc. Many of you know the Best Farmer competition that we organized together with a number of partners, including the New Vision, and connected to that the Harvest Money Expo in February, which are really flagships for us to show to Uganda that it needs a mindset change in agriculture and move away from the subsistence farming and into the commercial farming. And there are plenty of opportunities in that sector. I already mentioned tourism briefly. Wim is here and he can talk much more eloquently about that later, but the scenery, the gorillas, the River Nile, the extremely hospitable population, but also, and that is where a direction we are taking in an initiative to promote a different kind of tourism. There are also plenty of opportunities for activity-based tourism in Uganda. Hiking, biking, mountain climbing, you name it, Uganda is a very interesting place for that. Now, as a government and as an embassy, we have plenty of opportunities to support Dutch companies who are either already active or want to start business in Uganda. Together with RVO, we can help find the right partners, find finance, or even finance your organization from the government side to a certain degree, and help you to develop certain market segments together with Dutch and local partners. We have currently activities going on, as I said, in tourism, but also in horticulture, in dairy, in piggery, and a number of other sectors. We work very closely with the Netherlands-Uganda Trade and Investment Platform, and Inez is here to talk about that more. And all I can say is for anybody who's interested in doing business in Uganda, become a member of NUTIP. It will only set you back $150 a year, if I am still correct. So the money shouldn't be the issue, and it gives you a lot of benefit, especially from entrepreneurs, Dutch and Ugandan entrepreneurs who have been doing business here for so much longer than you and I have been around. Let's put it that way. There are currently about 200 Dutch companies with a tie to the Netherlands, with a tie to Uganda, either partly owned by Dutchmen or wholly owned. As I said, many of them active in agriculture, tourism, infrastructure and transport, but also creative industries, including ICT and marketing. And so I would like to finish by saying that Uganda and its capital Kampala is a very attractive place to do business in many ways. It has its challenges, obviously, but the place is safe. The climate is very nice, and there is indeed that creativity in Uganda that you may not see everywhere around the continent or in other places. And just to give you an example, now that face masks have become compulsory, there is not a street corner in Uganda where you cannot buy one of these in the most fantastic designs and fashions. And I wear these rather than the boring medical ones. And so Ugandans always find a way to make a bad situation better, and have that creativity that you need to be successful. I'll leave it here, but I'm very happy to answer any questions later on.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. For that, just briefly, I understand you'll be your term is ending in summer, and you're not going for a second, third term. Please, can you tell us where you're going and who will replace you?
Yes, yeah, we ambassadors don't do second terms. That's for politicians. If and when they get re-elected. No, I am finishing my 4-year term here in Uganda in about 6 or 7 weeks, and assuming that I will be able to get on one of those special flights, I will then, via the Netherlands, go to Ethiopia, where I will become ambassador for the next 4 years. My successor is Karin Boven. She is currently our ambassador in Sudan. She will arrive sometime in August. I actually have a telephone conversation with her later today to discuss the handover. And she is very, very much looking forward to starting in Kampala.
Thank you very much for that. Please send our greetings to her, and we'll share with her also the link of the recording of today's webinar. So
I will definitely do that.
Up to speed for her position. Yes, we already heard about NUTIP. Indeed, Inez van Oord is with us. She's the director of NUTIP at the moment. Please share with us something about your organization and the business opportunities in Uganda.
Thank you. I'm happy to do that, although I have to say that our ambassador explained very clearly what NUTIP already can do for your company when you come towards Uganda. NUTIP, Netherlands-Uganda Trade Investment Platform, is an organization where entrepreneurs, business people unite. They have in common that they all have a link with the Netherlands. This could be a Dutch owner, Dutch leader, could be a Ugandan owner, Ugandan leader, but they will do business then with Dutch companies, for instance. And it's a very inspiring mix of people that come together for network opportunities. But we also try to bring in some subjects, some matters that are all very valuable to us. We had a very interesting session on corruption last year, for instance, from a lawyer who's very experienced there. But we can also talk about, for instance, how to sell my company in Uganda once I want to return. We are going to do many more visits as well, because the number of Dutch-related companies is growing in Uganda. And for me personally, I have been living now 5 years in Uganda. I'm really, really sorry that I had to go. Really only because of a daughter that needs to go to Dutch school at a certain point. Comes at an age that Uganda is a bit too, not giving her probably enough freedom at this age. But I have been doing quite some business and been related, of course, to many companies. And I feel that the climate at the moment is very, very good for doing business. The whole value addition in the agricultural market is something that is starting. And I think there's yet a whole world to win. For many Dutch companies, I believe it would be a great opportunity to come with their knowledge on value addition and work together with Ugandan companies that are ready to grow and that want to grow their markets. And I don't think these markets are necessarily always in Europe. I think there's also a very big market in the region. There's Congo, there's South Sudan, there's Kenya, there's plenty of countries around that are very interested in buying products from Uganda. And I think what I always hear back also from a lot of companies within NUTIP is that the entrepreneurship is everywhere. And the mentality of the Ugandans is that they really like to move forward and learn. And this is all coming together in the platform of NUTIP, where we also really encourage the combination of Ugandan and Dutch business. I would love to save some time for questions. I would really like to encourage everyone who's listening today to this webinar that any ideas or thoughts or doubts you have regarding doing business in Uganda, please reach out to us, either via our website. You can contact me directly. There's some very other interesting board members that are also taking part of this conversation today, who have specific backgrounds in agriculture, tech. I think the internet tech industry is also coming up in Uganda. Creativity, indeed, like Henk-Jan was mentioning. I think that Uganda is very famous also for the fashion part of it. So I would love to see some more Dutch fashion, creative industry related businesses coming to Uganda. Please ask me more questions later. Thank you for now.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Inez. Indeed, if you mute yourself and stay on the line, then the questions are going to come in. I already see something coming in about agri, but I'll address it in a bit, because we still have the three speakers lined up. We start with Mr. Wim Kok. He's the co-owner of Matoke Tours, company which has been active in Uganda for over a decade, one of the market leaders in the country. Really a story from a company started from scratch, from a small student attic somewhere in the Netherlands into one of the market leaders in Uganda. The story, as a former journalist in Uganda, you'd always loved to write. The newspaper boy to millionaire, but of course now things have changed drastically in the tourism industry. So Wim, thank you for being with us. Can you give a brief overview of your company and who you are, how you got involved in it?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so Matoke Tours was established by my business partners, Koen and Paul. They started in 2002 from their student house, and Koen moved to Uganda where his parents were working, and Paul worked from his student house still. And they were selling group tours to Uganda, and Koen was actually guiding the trips himself and organizing them from Uganda. It's remaining quite a small company. Grew a bit to about 300, 400 packs a year. I joined in 2008, first with my own company, focusing on business to business, so executing tours for bigger tour companies from mainly Netherlands and Belgium. And that started growing. With that, the Dutch part of it started growing, and we merged into one company in 2012. And we are now three equal shareholders. And meanwhile, we have opened up a lodge in Madagascar and a lodge in Uganda. We have been we're executing tours now all over Africa. So it's not only Uganda anymore, but we still have our main office in Kampala, and Uganda is still, together with Tanzania, the main destination to go to, and probably the country we all still love the most.
And how many people do you employ, Wim?
We have in the Dutch office 16 people, and in the Uganda office we have 15 staff members, full-time employed, and then a few people who are like loads of guides, and so in total I think we're talking about around 80 people that we employ.
Mm-hmm. All right, so pretty substantive. And when was your last trip?
Well, I moved back. My last trip. Well, I moved back from Uganda.
For your customers, I would say. Sorry.
For my customers. The last trip was executed in, what was it? Early February, I think. Was a group of 7 entrepreneurs, and they were just really lucky. Actually, it shouldn't have been 2 or 3 days later. Then it would have been hard to, impossible basically to get in. So yeah, we have been, there's no tours that, we don't execute any tours at the moment.
Wow, that's coming to 4 months now. How do you survive?
Well, it's hard. In Holland, we have a bit of backup from the Dutch government with the NOW, the NOW. So that helps us to pay part of the salaries of our staff. But obviously, we have much more costs. So yeah, we are reaching deep into our pockets, and all the money and all the savings that we made over the last 17 years are slowly, or no, not slowly, very fast going away. And yeah, that's painful. But maybe even more painful is that, especially in Uganda, where there's no support, financial support from the government, at a certain point you have to let people go. And those people we have been working together with for years, we care about them, we love them, and we know that they don't have a financial backup from government. We did send them away with 3 months of salary, so that is already more than a lot of other companies do, but it's extremely painful.
And is there anything the government could do? Because of course here you see Western countries pumping massive amounts of money in their economies. You have 2 ambassadors here. What can they do to help you? How should they?
Yeah, it's of course very difficult. I understand very well that the travel industry can have a big impact on the spreading of corona. So there's a lot of things that we want, but at this moment, I think we just have to hope for a cure. The Dutch government, especially in Uganda, the ambassador Henk-Jan and Bakker, and has been very proactive and in the last years. And you can see that the government moved a lot from aid to trade, and I think that's the best way of helping people, to give them an identity rather than holding their hands. And we employ so many people, and the tourism industry is good for so much work. And I think there's not a solution. The only thing that I could ask is to have a lobby. Uganda specifically is in Africa doing so well, maybe the best of the class. So as soon as we can, I hope that there will be a lobby to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that they don't open up the borders to Europe, and the Dutch, let's say the Caribbeans, where the Dutch have a stake in, because that seems to be a political choice. And I think an orange travel advice should be about safety and not about a political choice. So the Dutch government obviously at some point has to either do tailor-made work, who is going to get a positive advice and who is not. And if not, then I hope Dutch government can take care of a better way of helping us out in this situation. For now, I think the ambassadors can help us best with a lobby as soon as the country opens up. And in the end, the most important thing is to protect the nature, because a lot of people have questions about traveling and sustainability. But I think it's one of the most sustainable industries in the world. We employ a lot of people, but we take care of nature. And obviously the flight itself is not all that great, but to far destinations, there's not an alternative yet. And on top of that, I think it's tourism that protects the national parks. Without tourism, there wouldn't be national parks left to protect.
At least
So,
the money that coming out of that is used for that indeed. May I quickly ask, I think you have something to say about
well,
this?
yes, that's why I came back in the picture. Of course, the government is very, very concerned, and we know that the loss of employment, especially in the tourism and leisure industry, is of big concern to the government. We don't want to have more unemployed people. As you know, we have many youth who are not yet employed. And tourism was really attractive to them if we train them to give them jobs, etc. There's a lot more to be expanded in the tourism and leisure sector. What the government is doing, we of course helping as well to see whether we can have moratorium on debt repayments. That is something that we were trying to do for many least developed countries. And I hope that, those ones we owe money to will be responsive to that. Because if we have a moratorium, for instance, for 2 years, that would release enormous amount of money. I think it would be 10 trillion shillings. And for that, we can do a lot for helping to rebuild the economy. We already have delayed payment of corporate taxes. We have deferred pay as you earn. We have a waiver of interest on tax arrears. We have extension periods for repayment of loans, and all these ones, we do capitalization of the UDC, Uganda Development Corporation, 300 billion to boost the agricultural production. So there are already measures in place in order to help to rebuild our economy. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to hear, but not as far as like paying 80% of salary. That's almost impossible,
no,
I guess.
We don't have the finances to do that. But if we could get the moratorium on repayment of loans, then we can do a lot more. So that is internationally something that we are trying to do. Yeah.
My main worry would be at the moment, besides the worries I just said, but about actually nature. You know, like when there's no income from nature and there's as well no rangers being paid, what will it do? People don't have an income. People have to eat. What is happening to the national parks? What is happening to the rainforest? We have to think about the long term, and even if it's not me and my company, I'm sure we will push it through. But even if it's not us, we care about nature, and I think there's a responsibility there. Do you know anything about how we are protecting nature, rainforest? Maybe difficult, oil is being getting in national parks. And the rules can be changed in these times where Corona will be in the headlines.
Can we answer this question very briefly, because we do need to go on to the next topic.
Yes. No, I think the awareness campaigns and knowing that tourism has brought so much prosperity to Uganda, since so many people are employed. At one time, it was the biggest foreign exchange earner that we had, even overtaking coffee. I think the awareness that we have created with Ugandans, how important it is to preserve our forests, to preserve our rainforest, that we hope that this push will certainly continue. I'm glad that the UWA has opened some of the parks, and I think opportunities for you is to also basically encourage local tourism, domestic tourism. So maybe there are indeed opportunities. That's all. You wanted to be brief, so let me.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Ambassador Blaak. Because we have two other speakers coming up. If first speakers can kindly mute themselves for now, and maybe later mute again when the time comes. Mr. Johan Verhoek is the export manager for Koudijs, Uganda, and he is, of course, a Dutch company, extremely active in a lot of African countries, but certainly very active in Uganda as well. Mr. Verhoek, thank you for being with us today.
Good morning or afternoon.
Yes, maybe could you briefly, for the people who are less familiar with your company, briefly update us on what you do and especially what you're doing in Uganda?
Yeah, Koudijs is an international company who sells feed solutions. It's a daughter company of a big family company in the Netherlands, De Heus. We produce feed solutions and we export these feed solutions actually to the countries based on the local situation. So we make an inventory of the local situation and adjust whatever is necessary to get the best possible results for our customers into a concentrate, and we export this to several countries. We are active in more than 80 countries worldwide, and our mother company has production locations on almost all continents. We focus on revenue for our farmers, and this led in 2015 to the entrance of our company in the Ugandan market. We joined with a local partner, Kafika, and together we made the best possible choices in what concentrates would be best for the Ugandan market. And we were helped actually a great deal by the Dutch embassy and of course the Ugandan embassy, because we partnered up with the best farmers of Uganda, and a lot of poultry farmers were able to get acquainted with our products.
Okay, yeah, so animal feed, so that is feed for chicken, cows, pigs, even any type of poultry of animal we can think of. And of course, in your sector, I have the feeling that it's a crucial sector that it can continue. Is it, to which extent does it continue in the current situation?
Yeah, actually, a chicken will lay an egg every day, although the costs of laying an egg will increase. And actually what we saw, and that is the good thing of Uganda, it's an agricultural country. The maize will grow, the soya will grow, so the country still makes value. And due to the crisis, we saw also that customers laid off their birds because of a low demand for eggs. But we saw also a lot of creativity with the Ugandan farmers. They started to sell off their own eggs. They did some marketing of their own instead of just giving the eggs along with the trader. And a lot of new consumers got the taste of the eggs and experienced the healthy effects of eating eggs. So we see an increase in local consumption due to the creativity of the Ugandan farmers. So our turnover is actually quite consistent, except the supply has had a big hiccup. Shipments were delayed for more than a month and are still at the Malaba border. So there's a lot of stock coming in, but it is stuck at the border.
Will it run out at some point?
Again?
Will you run out of it at some point?
We actually run out. So we're completely empty, and we can stock a huge amount of concentrates, but it was all drained. So the turnover was actually continuing. But good to know, everybody, the trucks are not the first in line, but they're not the last in line at the Malaba border. So we hope to restock by the end of this week.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because there was also actually a question coming in from Mr. Jaap Blom about it. It's not that it's completely stuck. After the test, the drivers can continue their way into Uganda, as if I understand. So it's a delay, but not a complete block, right?
Yeah, I understood there was a 70-kilometer traffic jam.
Wow, that is pretty impressive.
So we're happy we're not last in line.
That's I mean, in general, I mean, we see a lot of people now talking about the post-COVID era. Would you recommend other Dutch companies to do business in Uganda?
Yeah, actually, doing business in Uganda, we are available in almost all African countries. And of course, I've traveled around also to other African countries, but I actually fell in love with Uganda. Not because this is about Uganda, but the country is very open and adapts based on experiences, revenue. So they're real entrepreneurs, and when they see something good happening with their neighbor, they copy it. So as long as you bring something good, you will survive. And that's how we try to maintain and enter into the Ugandan, actually to stay in Uganda.
I see. Okay, that's good to hear. Of course, there's always challenges as well. Much if you love the country or not. But is there anything that you say? Okay, this is what we've experienced in coming months. Here we can still see improvement, and then in normal times, and not in this exceptional period.
No, actually, when we see the collaboration we have with URA, the collaboration with the local authorities, it all works very smoothly at the office, where you can go for all questions on setting up an entrepreneurship. They're all easy, accessible, and Uganda is actually working very much along with people who want to set something up. The only thing is, make sure if you want to set something up, be available there as well. So you work with people you know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Absolutely, it's a good advice. Thank you very much, Mr. Verhoek. If there's any questions, please answer them later, because we first have one final speaker, Mr. Mutaahi. Mark Mutaahi is a managing partner of the BID Network. Thank you very much for joining us. I think from you, we'll have more the investor's perspective. Could you please give us your vision about the investment climate in Uganda, and tell us a little bit more about the BID Network's activities there?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So BID Network, we are a transaction advisory firm, and we are supporting entrepreneurs in the region to raise capital, growth capital for their businesses. We are Dutch founded. We've been in the market for quite some time now. Our first activities here were back in 2007. And at present, we have an office in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, in Uganda, where I'm sitting right now, and in Kigali. So like I said, our role is really to help investors, both institutional and private investors, find opportunities here, and at the same time also help entrepreneurs that are trying to reach these investors. So my team is a group of highly specialized finance people, and most of the work we do is in building out projections, financial models, investor introductions, and also transaction advisory on the actual deal. So what are we seeing? So many people ask us this question: what's happening in the investment market? Entrepreneurs are looking for funding at this time. How do investors feel? So there's multiple things, and I think that the reaction is the same across institutional and individual investors. So first of all, the sentiment is the same Africa-wide. So it's not limited to East Africa or Uganda. What you see is on the institutional side, first of all, is many of the private equity players, whether they provide, whether they provide debt, whether they provide equity, are choosing to support the existing companies as opposed to enter new transactions. A lot of them are trying to understand what's happening with these businesses over the next 3 to 6 months, and which is difficult because the situation is sort of changing day by day. Of course, businesses that are heavily reliant on international supply chains are having a lot of challenges with the travel. They've been describing what's happening at the border and all that. On the plus side, though, there's some very specific companies that we are seeing that are having some positive traction. So those that are either in pharmaceuticals, healthcare, IT, delivery, e-learning solutions, fintech. We have a pharmaceutical company that has seen about a 3x increase in their month-over-month revenues, mainly from selling sanitizers, face masks, multivitamins, or whatever it is, PPE equipment. So what's happening with investors, first of all, is we think and we expect that future investments will have a different type of due diligence analysis. In the past, when things were well, a big focus for investors was, how is your opportunity better than the other person's? How is your business placed against the competition and all that? Now, that is changing to, do you have the ability to access credit? What do your cash flows look like? And what contingency plans do you have in place? we also do expect, increased slowdowns, especially for transactions that rely on ancillary services. So things like land registry, registering collateral, and things like that, because it will depend on the availability of the schedule, accounting services. For the institutional players, we are seeing many of the investment committees are pushing out their meetings and their sittings, so decisions are taking longer simply because people are in different places, and many of the people that are based in Europe have gone home, so things are a little bit all over the place. On the plus side, though, many of the private equity players that are funded by DFI capital are being the most flexible right now. So the DFI players are still committed to their investee companies. They're committed to these private equity players. So a lot of them sit in Nairobi, based out of Europe. So whoever is funded by the likes of FMO, DEG, Propaco, Bio, CDC, many of those have a lot of flexibility right now. So for us as transaction advisors,
to try to avoid a little bit the slogans, the DFIs, I think they're the development finance institutions.
Oh, sorry. So okay, sorry. So yes, DFIs are the development finance institutions. These are, I guess the ambassadors can speak more to them. These are government entities that invest and support private sector. So yes, so the ones that I mentioned, Propaco, DEG, FMO, those are individuals for different countries, France, Bio for Belgium, FMO for the Dutch. So for us as transaction advisors, we are with the companies we're working with, the ask is one, prepare them for heightened expectations when it comes to due diligence, prepare them for longer decision-making from the investors based on international travel. Also, have them expect different valuations. This is sort of the frustrating piece. There's always been a mismatch between expectations. Entrepreneurs are looking for higher valuations. Investors are looking for lower valuations. And unfortunately, many of these valuations are based on revenues. So with lower revenues over the last, 3 to 4 months and expected to continue, we expect lower valuations. So it's likely there will be heightened and tougher negotiations. So, we set these expectations out the gate. Some of the PE funds that are still fundraising are not fully funded, are reevaluating some of their timelines. Overall, there's slowed investor activity. We also do expect, though, on the positive side, Ambassador Mirjam was talking about some of the tax incentives. The expectation is some of these incentives will stay post-COVID and just have a lag effect before they catch up, which is a positive for many of these businesses. So overall, I would say that there's a cautious optimism. The implication of a lack of, the implication of the travel restrictions has been really, really impactful, because in 99% of the cases, you don't have transactions closed without an actual site visit. So the due diligence can all be done online. There's a lot of electronic solutions. There's digitized due diligence happening now, but most of the cases, somebody will actually get on site and visit. So until they open up the borders and we have people traveling, we are setting up our businesses to expect delays. We're doing everything we can and just wait on that one condition, which is once we can actually travel. The other thing too is we expect a rise in impact funding. I think COVID across the board has sort of had a rise in human consciousness and concern. And in this market, many of the businesses are classified as impact social enterprises and the like. So we expect more funding to flow both from DFIs, individuals, private investors, to impact growth opportunities, which is overall a good thing. So I think that that's sort of the landscape of things right now, and I'm happy to take any questions later on.
I would like to thank all the participants, definitely the ambassadors who have been with us, the entrepreneurs, of course the NUTIP, and all the participants. We had over 60 people listening in at some point, which is a very good score. Thanks a lot. Next week we have a webinar about doing business in Algeria coming up for the companies that are interested in more African markets. I would like to leave it here with that, and on behalf of the NABC, I would like to wish you all a very wonderful rest of the day. Thank you and goodbye.
Bye-bye.